What happens when one of Hollywood's most intense actors sits down with one of daytime television's most outspoken hosts, and a simple question about politics turns into an on-air explosion that nobody saw coming? The tension in the studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and what started as a routine interview quickly spiraled into something that had the entire audience gasping. Cameras kept rolling as voices got louder, and by the end, Kiefer Sutherland said something that left Joy Behar completely speechless. Before we get into what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us whose side you're on in this clash. The View's iconic roundtable was buzzing with its usual energy as the show returned from commercial break. Joy Behar sat at the center of the panel, a coffee mug in hand, her signature smirk already in place. The other hosts exchanged knowing glances, the kind that suggested they knew this interview was going to be interesting. Kiefer Sutherland walked onto the set to enthusiastic applause, waving to the audience with that quiet confidence he's known for. He settled into the guest chair, adjusting his microphone as the applause died down. Joy leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with that familiar spark of mischief. "Kiefer, welcome back to The View. Always a pleasure to have you here." "Thanks for having me, Joy," Kiefer replied, his voice carrying that distinctive rasp that had made Jack Bauer a household name. "So," Joy began, shuffling her note cards, "you're here to talk about your new project, but I have to ask, you've played some pretty intense characters over the years. Jack Bauer, President Kirkman. I mean, these are guys who are always trying to save the country. Do you ever feel like you want to save the country in real life?" The audience chuckled. Kiefer smiled politely. "Well, I think we all want to do our part, don't we? But I leave the real saving to people who are actually qualified." Joy nodded, but there was something in her expression that suggested she wasn't satisfied with that answer. Sure, but you must have opinions. I mean, you've spent decades playing these political figures, these heroes. You must look at what's going on in the world and think, wow, we could use a Jack Bauer right about now." Kiefer's smile faded slightly. "I think the world is a bit more complicated than a television show, Joy." "Oh, absolutely," Joy said, waving her hand dismissively. "But come on, you've been in this business long enough. You've seen how art imitates life. Your show, 24, it was practically a love letter to a certain kind of politics, wasn't it? The whole torture works, the ends justify the means, that kind of thing." The studio went quiet. The other hosts shifted in their seats. Kiefer's jaw tightened, just barely, but enough that anyone paying attention would notice. "I think that's a pretty reductive way to look at a show that ran for almost a decade and dealt with a lot of complex themes." Joy raised her eyebrows. "Reductive? I mean, let's call it what it was. Your character literally tortured people every other episode, and people loved it. That show came out right after a very specific time in American history, and it fed into a very specific narrative." Kiefer leaned back in his chair, his arms crossing over his chest. "Joy, with all due respect, 24 was a drama. It was fiction. We weren't making a political statement. We were telling stories about extreme situations. If people took away a political message from it, that's their interpretation, not our intention." "But intention matters, doesn't it?" Joy pressed, her tone sharpening. "I mean, you can't put something like that out into the world and then wash your hands of how it's received. That show normalized things that shouldn't have been normalized." Kiefer's eyes narrowed. "What are you actually asking me, Joy? Are you asking me about the show? Or are you trying to put words in my mouth about my personal politics?" Joy leaned back, a slight smile playing at her lips. "I'm just saying, you made a show that a lot of people on a certain side of the aisle really, really loved. And I'm curious if you stand by that now, or if you've had a change of heart." The audience was dead silent now. One of the other hosts tried to interject, "I think what Joy is trying to say is—" But Kiefer cut her off, his voice calm but firm. "No, let Joy say what she's trying to say. Because it sounds to me like she's trying to box me into some kind of political corner based on a character I played 20 years ago. Joy didn't back down. I'm not boxing you into anything. I'm asking you to own the impact of your work. That's not unreasonable. Kiefer's face remained composed, but there was fire behind his eyes now. Own the impact? Joy, I've spent my entire career trying to tell stories that make people think, that challenge them, that entertain them. If you want to reduce all of that down to some kind of political weapon, that's on you, not me. So you don't think 24 had any political impact? Joy challenged. Of course it had an impact, Kiefer shot back. Everything has an impact. But you're acting like we were running some kind of propaganda machine, and that's insulting. Not just to me, but to everyone who worked on that show. Joy shook her head, her smile gone now. I'm not trying to insult you, Kiefer. I'm trying to have an honest conversation about responsibility. You don't get to just say it's fiction and walk away. Kiefer's voice rose slightly, not quite a shout, but louder, more intense. And you don't get to sit there and tell me what my intentions were. You weren't in the writer's room. You weren't on set. You didn't see the conversations we had about these issues. But I saw the show, Joy countered, and so did millions of other people. And what they saw was a hero who got results by breaking the rules, by torturing, by doing whatever it took. You can't tell me that didn't influence how people thought about those issues. Kiefer stood up now, not in a threatening way, but in a way that made it clear he was done being talked down to. You know what, Joy? You're right. Art influences people. And maybe 24 influenced people in ways that made them think differently about security, about terrorism, about what it means to protect your country. But you're sitting here acting like that influence was all negative, like we were trying to brainwash people, and that's just not true. The other hosts looked at each other, unsure whether to intervene. The audience was riveted. Joy remained seated, but her posture was defensive now. I never said brainwash, Kiefer. No, but you implied it, Kiefer said, his voice cutting through the tension. You implied that we had some kind of agenda, that we were trying to push a certain political viewpoint. And that's garbage. We were trying to make good television. We were trying to tell stories that kept people on the edge of their seats. If you want to have a conversation about the ethics of storytelling, fine, let's have that conversation. But don't sit there and accuse me of being some kind of political operative because I played a character who made tough choices in impossible situations. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Kiefer wasn't finished. And you know what else? This is exactly what's wrong with the way we talk about art and entertainment now. Everything has to be political. Everything has to fit into some neat little box of right or wrong, good or bad. Well, life isn't like that, Joy, and neither is good storytelling. Joy's face flushed. I'm not trying to put anything in a box, Kiefer. I'm trying to hold you accountable. Accountable for what? Kiefer's voice was incredulous now. For doing my job? For playing a character? Should every actor who's ever played a villain be held accountable for inspiring bad behavior? Should every filmmaker who's made a war movie be responsible for glorifying violence? Where does it end? The audience began to murmur, some in agreement with Kiefer, others clearly siding with Joy. One of the other hosts finally managed to get a word in. I think we can all agree that this is a complicated issue. But Kiefer and Joy were locked in now, neither willing to back down. Joy stood up, facing him across the table. It ends when people take responsibility for their influence. That's where it ends. You have a platform, Kiefer. You've had one for decades. And with that platform comes responsibility. Kiefer's laugh was bitter. You want to talk about responsibility? How about the responsibility to have a fair conversation? How about the responsibility not to ambush your guests with loaded questions designed to make them look bad? Joy's eyes widened at that accusation. Ambush? This is a talk show, Kiefer. We ask questions. That's what we do. You ask questions with an agenda, Kiefer fired back. There's a difference between asking questions and trying to trap someone into saying what you want them to say. You had your mind made up about me and that show before I even sat down here. That's not true, Joy insisted, but her voice had lost some of its edge. I'm asking you legitimate questions about the content you put out into the world. Kiefer shook his head. No, you're prosecuting me for thought crimes. You're upset that 24 didn't align with your political worldview, so now you're trying to make me answer for that. Well, I'm sorry, Joy, but I don't owe you or anyone else an apology for making a show that was successful and that people enjoyed. Another host jumped in, trying to diffuse the situation. I think what we're all trying to get at is that there's been a lot of conversation in recent years about the responsibility that comes with creating content, especially content that deals with sensitive topics. Kiefer turned to her, his expression softening slightly. And I appreciate that conversation, I really do. But there's a difference between having a thoughtful discussion about the impact of media and what's happening here, which is Joy trying to paint me as some kind of right-wing propagandist because of a role I played. Joy scoffed. I never called you a propagandist. You didn't have to, Kiefer said. It's been dripping from every word you've said since I sat down. You started this whole thing by talking about saving the country and then immediately pivoted to torture and politics. You weren't interested in talking about my new project. You wanted to make a point. Joy crossed her arms. My point is that you can't separate the art from the artist, and you can't separate the art from its impact. 24 had an impact on how people viewed torture, how they viewed government overreach, how they viewed civil liberties. Studies have been done about this. Kiefer, this isn't just me making stuff up. Kiefer's voice rose again. And Breaking Bad had an impact on how people viewed drug dealers. Should Bryan Cranston apologize for that? The Sopranos made people sympathize with mobsters. Should James Gandolfini have apologized? This is ridiculous, Joy. We tell stories about complicated people in complicated situations. That's drama. That's art. But your show was different. Joy pressed. It came out at a very specific time, right after September 11th, when people were scared and angry, and your show fed into that fear and anger. It made torture seem heroic. Kiefer's face was red now, his composure slipping. Jack Bauer was not a hero because he tortured people. He was a hero because he was trying to save lives in impossible situations. The show constantly grappled with the moral consequences of his actions. He lost everything, Joy. His family, his freedom, his humanity. The show didn't glorify what he did. It showed the cost of it. Joy wasn't backing down. But millions of people watched that show and came away thinking that torture was justified. That's a fact. You can't deny that. I'm not denying that some people might have taken that away from it, Kiefer said, his voice strained. But you can't control how every single person interprets your work. All you can do is try to tell the truth as you see it, and the truth we were trying to tell was that protecting people sometimes requires making impossible choices, and those choices have consequences. So you're saying torture is justified? Joy pounced on his words. Kiefer's hands came up in frustration. That's not what I said, and you know it. You're twisting my words now, Joy, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. This isn't a conversation. This is you trying to get a soundbite that you can use against me. The audience was split now, some applauding Kiefer's pushback, others clearly agreeing with Joy's line of questioning. The energy in the studio was electric, tense, uncomfortable. The producers off camera were frantically gesturing, trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial or let this play out. Joy's voice took on a sharper edge. I'm not twisting anything. I'm asking you to clarify your position. Do you think torture is ever justified? Yes or no? Kiefer laughed, but there was no humor in it. You see what you're doing? You're trying to reduce an incredibly complex moral question down to a yes or no answer so you can use it against me no matter what I say. If I say yes, you'll call me a monster. If I say no, you'll call me a hypocrite for making a show that depicted it. This is a trap, and I'm not playing this game." "It's not a game, Kiefer," Joy said, her voice rising to match his. "These are real issues. Real people were tortured in real prisons because people in power thought it was okay. And shows like yours contributed to that climate." Kiefer's voice was almost a shout now. "Shows like mine? Shows like mine tried to grapple with the complexity of these issues in a way that news coverage and political debate couldn't. We showed the human cost. We showed the moral ambiguity. We didn't make it black and white, Joy. We made it gray. And if you can't see that, then you weren't really watching the show. You were just looking for something to be offended by." One of the other hosts tried again to intervene. "I think we're all getting a little heated here. Maybe we should take a breath and—" But Joy cut her off. "No, I want to hear this. I want to hear Kiefer explain how a show that featured torture in almost every episode was somehow a nuanced exploration of morality." Kiefer leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "You want nuance, Joy? Here's some nuance for you. Jack Bauer tortured people. Yes, that happened on the show. But he also suffered for it. He was put on trial. He was imprisoned. He lost the trust of the people he loved. He became a broken man. The show didn't say torture is great and we should all do it. The show said that, in extreme circumstances, people might make terrible choices, and those choices destroy them. That's the story we told. If you can't see that, then I don't know what to tell you." Joy shook her head vigorously. "But you're missing the point. The point is that millions of viewers didn't see that nuance. They saw Jack Bauer as a hero. They saw him getting results. They saw him saving the day, and that's what they took away from it." "So what do you want me to do about that?" Kiefer's voice was exasperated now. "Apologize for the fact that some people misunderstood the show? Apologize for the fact that we told a story that made people uncomfortable? I'm an actor, Joy. I tell stories. I don't control how people interpret them, and I shouldn't have to." Joy's face was flushed, her voice cutting. "But you do have a responsibility. That's what I'm trying to get you to understand. When you have the kind of platform you have, when you reach the kind of audience you reached, you have a responsibility to think about the message you're sending." Kiefer stood up fully now, his body language aggressive. "I think about it every single day. Every time I take a role, every time I read a script, I think about what it means and what it's saying. But I refuse to apologize for taking a role in a show that made people think, that challenged them, that didn't give them easy answers. If you want art that spoon-feeds you a moral lesson, go watch a kid's show. 24 was for adults, and it treated its audience like adults who could think for themselves." The audience gasped at the kids' show comment. Joy's mouth fell open. "Are you seriously suggesting that anyone who has a problem with your show is childish?" "I'm suggesting that anyone who can't handle moral complexity in their entertainment might need to stick to simpler fare," Kiefer shot back. "And I'm suggesting that you're doing exactly what you're accusing the show of doing. You're simplifying everything down to good guys and bad guys, right and wrong with no room for anything in between." Joy's voice was ice cold now. "I know the difference between right and wrong, Kiefer, and I know that torture is wrong. Always. No exceptions. And any show that suggests otherwise is dangerous." Kiefer's voice matched hers in intensity. "Our show never suggested torture was right. It showed it as a desperate act by a desperate man in desperate circumstances, and it showed the consequences. If you can't see the difference between depicting something and endorsing it, then you don't understand how storytelling works." "Don't lecture me about storytelling," Joy snapped. "I've been in this business longer than you've been alive." Kiefer's laugh was sharp. "Then act like it. Act like someone who understands that art is supposed to challenge us, not comfort us. Act like someone who can separate fiction from reality." The studio was in chaos now. The audience was murmuring loudly, some people standing up. The other hosts were trying to talk over each other, attempting to regain control of the segment. But Joy and Kiefer were locked in their confrontation, neither willing to give an inch. Joy pointed a finger at him. "You don't get to come on this show and insult me, Kiefer." You don't get to dismiss legitimate concerns about the impact of your work by calling people childish or suggesting they can't handle complexity. And you don't get to ambush me with a political inquisition disguised as an interview, Kiefer fired back. You invited me here to talk about my new project, and instead, you've spent the entire time trying to make me into a villain because I played a character you don't approve of. That's not journalism, Joy. That's a hit job. Joy's face went from flushed to pale. A hit job? You think this is a hit job? I'm asking you questions that millions of people want answers to. Questions about responsibility, about the role of entertainment in shaping public opinion. Kiefer's voice dropped, becoming quieter but somehow more intense. No, Joy. You're asking me questions designed to make me look bad no matter how I answer them. You're not interested in a real conversation. You're interested in scoring points. We could have talked about the responsibility of artists, about how fiction interacts with reality, but instead, you decided to make this personal. I didn't make this personal, Joy protested. You're the one who started attacking me. I'm defending myself, Kiefer corrected. You came at me with accusations and judgments, and I'm pushing back. If you can't handle that, then maybe you shouldn't ask questions you don't want real answers to. One of the other hosts tried to intervene. I think we need to acknowledge that this has become more confrontational than anyone intended. But Joy wasn't done. Kiefer, all I've done is ask you to account for the impact of your work. That's accountability. And if you can't handle being held accountable, then maybe you're not as comfortable with moral complexity as you claim to be. Kiefer's jaw clenched. I've spent 30 years taking responsibility for my work, but what I won't do is sit here and let you put words in my mouth or intentions in my heart that were never there. You don't know what I believe, Joy. You're making assumptions based on your own political biases, and then demanding that I answer for those assumptions. Joy slammed her hand on the table, making everyone jump. My political biases? That's rich coming from someone who made a show that became a recruiting tool for a certain political ideology. The audience erupted in gasps and scattered applause. Kiefer's face went stone cold. A recruiting tool? You think we were sitting around trying to recruit people to a political cause? That's insane, Joy. Is it? Joy challenged. Your show became part of the political discourse. Politicians referenced it in debates about interrogation techniques. Kiefer's voice was dangerously calm, and the West Wing became part of political discourse and House of Cards. That doesn't make them propaganda. That makes them culturally relevant. You're conflating influence with intention because it serves your narrative. Joy leaned forward. What's my narrative, Kiefer? Please, enlighten me. Your agenda, Kiefer said slowly, is to make me into a symbol of everything you think is wrong with post-September 11th America. You want me to be the guy who made torture acceptable? You need me to be that guy so you can have your villain. But I'm not going to play that role for you, Joy. I'm just an actor who did his job and did it well. And if that bothers you, that's your problem, not mine. The studio went completely silent. Joy stared at Kiefer, clearly trying to formulate a response. But before she could speak, Kiefer continued. The real problem is that you can't accept that people might have different perspectives than you do. You can't accept that a show might explore difficult questions without giving you the answers you want. 24 showed you choices and let you decide. And apparently, that's not good enough for you. You need everyone to think exactly the way you think. And when they don't, you attack them. Joy found her voice, but it was shaking. I am not attacking you. I've been on this show for years, and we have different perspectives at this table every single day. Different perspectives that fit within your acceptable range of opinions, Kiefer countered. But when someone really challenges you, when someone pushes back against your assumptions, you don't know what to do with it. Joy jumped back in. When your art has real-world consequences, you need to acknowledge that. I acknowledge it, Kiefer said firmly. But acknowledging influence is not the same as accepting blame. You're asking me to apologize for the fact that some people came to conclusions you don't like, and I won't do that. Joy's voice was incredulous. So you feel no responsibility at all for the way your show was used to justify torture? Kiefer's response was immediate. My show didn't justify torture. People who wanted to justify torture used my show as an excuse. There's a massive difference. You're holding me to a standard that you wouldn't hold any other artist to, and you're doing it because of politics. This isn't about politics, Joy insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. It's entirely about politics, Kiefer shot back. If 24 had been about a liberal hero, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But because the show didn't fit your political template, you've decided it's dangerous. Joy hesitated. That's a false equivalency. No, it's not, Kiefer pressed. You're judging 24 based on whether it reinforces your political worldview. Joy tried to regain composure. I'm trying to have an honest conversation about responsibility in media. Kiefer's laugh was bitter. An honest conversation? You've spent 15 minutes accusing me of promoting torture, of being a propaganda tool. If that's your idea of honest, I'd hate to see dishonest. Joy stood up now. Maybe the reason you feel trapped is because you know, deep down, that there's some truth to what I'm saying. Kiefer's voice was dangerously quiet. Don't you dare tell me what I know or don't know. Don't you dare pretend you have insight into my thoughts or my conscience. You don't know me, Joy. All you know is what fits your narrative, and you're trying to force me into that box. I'm not forcing you into anything, Joy said defensively. You're prosecuting me, Kiefer said, his voice final, and I'm done being on trial for doing my job. I came here to talk about my new project, but you had a different plan. You wanted to show everyone how progressive you are by taking down someone who doesn't fit your political mold. Well, congratulations, Joy. You got your moment. But you didn't get your confession, and you're not going to. The silence was deafening. Joy stood there, her mouth working but no words coming out. The other hosts looked between them, clearly at a loss. And then, slowly, Kiefer reached up and removed his microphone. I think we're done here, he said quietly. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments, who do you think had the stronger argument in this clash? Was Joy right to hold Kiefer accountable, or did she cross the line? Drop your thoughts below,